Alright, so getting back into our in-depth exploration of solipsism, we find a philosophical variation classified as methodological solipsism. A strange designation, as solipsism is best described as an introspective conduit towards the fundamental truth of reality. So how does methodology, relating to a system of methods used in a particular area of study or activity, apply here? Solipsism isn't really an area of study, nor an activity, and shouldn't even be called a philosophy. So what are the methods being implied, and towards what utility are these methods being employed? Is methodological solipsism perhaps advocating for meditation, lucid dreaming, sensory deprivation, or psychonautical explorations? Oddly, not. Again, as found to be similarly the case with epistemological solipsism, methodological solipsism seems to be mainly preoccupied with thinking, doubting, and the treatment of knowledge. So let's investigate methodological solipsism. According to a general definition, methodological solipsism is an agnostic variant of solipsism. It exists in opposition to the strict epistemological requirements for knowledge, the requirements that knowledge must be certain. It still entertains the points that any induction is fallible, and that we may be brains and vats. Methodological solipsism sometimes goes even further to say that even what we perceive as the brain is actually part of the external world, for it is only through our senses that we can see or feel the mind. Only the existence of thoughts is known for certain. Unfortunately, that was a bit of a weak definition, composed of vague descriptions, lacking strong, clear declarations as to what the actual position of methodological solipsism is. So according to generality, methodological solipsism is a variety of an outside reference, exists in opposition to an outside reference, entertains the point of an outside reference, and sometimes goes even further to say an outside reference. And all that's nice, but ordinarily when trying to present a comprehensive elucidation of a subject, you need to outline more on the side of what a position is, rather than what it isn't. Only in the last part of the attempted description, the assertion that only the existence of thoughts is known for certain is put forth as a solid positive descriptive statement. And more on that in a moment. But to quickly address the more wishy-washy segments of the explanation, this position is described as an agnostic variant of solipsism. Whatever could this be referring to? A lack of commitment to the implications of the position? Yes, you seem to be aware of a something or other going on somewhere or other, and are not prepared to say one way or the other about what can be known about this one way or the other. Very well. Then stick to what you really know, that which cannot be denied without forfeiting that which is doing the denying. There is awareness. Never mind what that means, what can be known or not known about it, or the uncertainty that prevents the commitment to a belief about it. There is awareness. This much is known for sure. This should be your initial premise, because it is the initial premise. Then you can move on to better address the context of the thoughts that you seem to be aware of. Knowledge is never going to be certain, because any and all possible knowledge is relative only to a contextualization. But don't allow this to enable you to become stagnant, wallowing in a sticky pocket of suspended stasis. You are aware. And this fact is a fact before the onset of thinking, in the subsequent confection of contextual knowledge. Standing in this truth, the premise of it becomes infallible. And whether or not we are actually brains in a vat is irrelevant. Never mind what you might imagine to be a hidden truth about what you actually already find to be the case. These are all abstract externalizations, still seeking to assign responsibility elsewhere, even if this allocation of power is to an ambiguity. Stick to what you find to be the case, foremost and firsthand. Methodological solipsism almost hits the mark when it sometimes goes as far as to make the observation that the brain is an inventory item within the field of perception. But then it goes off base, integrating this with the imagined idea of an external world, further entangling itself in a web of thoughts. And I think this is the major problem with methodological solipsism. It clings to an identification with the thinking function, which is silly, as thinking is just an operation of an organism, to which awareness, the primary agency, is not ultimately attached. This would be like forming an identification with a hungry stomach, or to an aroused genitalia. Interesting functions, to be sure, but not true proper identities, to be sure. There comes a point with introspective inquiry where there needs to be a dissociative split from the identification with thoughts. This is one of the issues a solipsist is going to encounter in the introspective journey. The complacent tendency of not traveling deep enough within. This is when a philosopher moves a little bit within themselves, but then quickly sets up camp among the shallow inner layers and assumes the mission is complete. This is exemplified by simply moving the place marker of an identification of the self to an earlier designation than the physical body. It's a step in the right direction, to be sure, but will lead to confusion and difficulty if not followed through upon the whole way. Where epistemological solipsism moves the place marker back to an assumptive position at the event horizon of the thinking mind's interaction with knowledge, methodological solipsism moves the place marker back a step earlier to the thinking process itself. This is where we will find the old tattered weather-beaten flag of 16th century French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, Rene Descartes, embroidered with his now world-famous maxim, cogito ergo sum, translated as, I think, therefore I am, or also sometimes stated as, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. So from this it seems that whatever methods methodological solipsism is referring to, that any actual methods consist rather more as abstractions than pragmatic tangible techniques, logistical schematics used as an analytical guideline for proper intellectual masturbation. And just on a little crypto-semantic side note, a notation you might want to contemplate earnestly. The word anal is not rooted in the word analytical merely by accident. But anyway, if you've managed to get past the identification with the physical body, one of the great difficulties an existential agent will initially confront, there will be an even greater difficulty to navigate: the thinking mind, of which half of the greater difficulty will be in simply discerning that the thinking process is not the intended destination. It only seems that way because it's as abstract as the mind can conceive of intellectually, while staying loyal to the parameters of an imagined scientific standard. You can doubt everything all the way down to that which is doing the doubting, but if you try to doubt that which is doing the doubting, then what is it exactly that is doubting the doubting? The thinking mind. Hence, I think, therefore I am. This is as far as Descartes got. Thinking. But as abstract as the spectrum of the mental facilities are, this is still an externalization, as thinking itself is not nearly as ethereal as the fundamental essence ultimately isn't. It goes much deeper than that. Descartes might have benefited from some sitting meditation. Notice how, when asserting, I think, therefore I am, the I in this is taken for granted as a given, and its descriptive classification is conveniently glossed over. There is no clarification, so apparently this must mean that the I is the thinking mind. As to use skepticism to reduce down to a conclusion that only the existence of thoughts is known for certain is to identify a self with thoughts. If we stop here with the idea of a self associated with pure thinking, then of course it will disconnect existentiality from its purpose. This mutes the function of symbiotic experiential agencies, as it will inevitably drain all the quality and lushness from life. This is the problem with the intellect. It can be cold, calculating, selfish, and myopic. Indeed, too much intellect can even be considered a handicap. For when it comes to uncovering the truth of the nature of reality, gaining clarity into these matters will entail unlearning, and the mind's ability to retain unbending focus, and not become distracted by the constant din of the thinking mind. You're not ever going to stop the thinking mind, but you can lower its volume, so to speak, with the mind's increased ability to differentiate itself from the thoughts, and, in a manner of speaking, minimize this frame down to the bottom of the taskbar. So moving on from the general definition to some other more extensive descriptions of methodological solipsism. It is stated in Epistemology and the Philosophy of Mind, methodological solipsism has at least two distinct definitions, of which each will be dissected accordingly. The first definition. Methodological solipsism is the epistemological thesis that the individual self and its states, such as subjective impressions, empiricism, or innate knowledge, rationalism, are the sole possible proper starting points for philosophical construction. which emphasizes that justifications of an external world must be founded on indisputable facts about one's own consciousness. Can you now see the issue that continually keeps cropping up with this position? Despite understanding that an introspective factor is the only sure thing, it misidentifies what exactly this factor is, and still wants to externalize it. It wants to substitute the real foundation, awareness itself, with characteristics of illusion as the foundation. Philosophical construction won't hold up under its own weight if the foundation upon which it stands is composed of weak fallacy. Empiricism is not a proper foundation, nor is rationalism, as these are both but tools of awareness, and are equally part of the illusion, just as the idea of an external world and one's so-called own consciousness. This is making everything about the ego, and the ego is also not a proper foundation, as it too is but an inventory item of illusion. These applications may have their limited utility within illusion, like as the basis for a science established within a dream. But this is a very shallow consideration for philosophy to be concerned with. Yes, there are rules to the dream, many of which can be tested and experimented with, the results of which often producing reliable results, which can then be used as a basis for a sort of scientific knowledge about the context of an illusion. But when it comes to more deeper philosophical interests, the fundamental nature of reality is of greater importance than the contexts of falsehoods. This is why the explanations offered for methodological solipsism are so vapid. They are not really interested in providing fundamental truth, but only with what can be demonstrated to be a contextual truth within a fabrication. This is why it is said that methodological solipsism is often not held as a belief system, but rather used as a thought experiment to assist in skepticism, which I think is the real underlying intentions behind this position. It's just a tool to assist in doubting, which is a gold standard of intellectual integrity, to simply doubt everything and anything, and not budge until it can be proven otherwise, within the criteria of a specific framework. And overlooking the fundamental truth, whether intentional or not, is why these methods produce such mundane explanations. They are not concerned with illumination, only with what can be agreed upon within the delusion of a subjective frame of reference. And now the second definition. Methodological solipsism is the thesis that the mental properties or mental states of an organism can be individuated exclusively on the basis of that state or property's relations with other internal states of the organism itself, without any reference to the society, culture, or the physical world in which the organism is embedded. This is an extreme position that implies that the content of someone's beliefs about, say, water, as an example, has absolutely nothing to do with the substance water in the outside world, nor with the commonly accepted definition of the society in which that person lives. Everything is determined internally. Moreover, the only thing that other people have to go on in ascribing beliefs to someone else are the internal states of his or her physical brain. This is basically a perfunctory proposition that is quite perplexing, as it represents yet another externalization that assumes imaginary divisions within illusion, while claiming that the external has no bearing on any subject, yet somehow still implies that there are objective norms that have been established by a collective of subjects, i.e., a culture or society. This also implies that there is an outside world, of which a subject is somehow in conjunction with, despite being partitioned from it completely, with the mind forming mental states and mental properties on its own, totally unrelated to the outside phenomena. I would say this position has a ton of issues, and is just reaching around in the dark. It's not clarifying what these mental states and properties are, but yet can still nevertheless assert that they are in a special configuration with external factors. A bit of nonsense. The mental states or mental properties being implied here are still part of the field of illusion. They are still in the spectrum of that which is contextualized within fundamental reality. So this whole line of distinction isn't providing existential explorers with any useful knowledge of the journey. So, in closing, I will reiterate the spirit of this point. You are charged with finding out what the truth of reality is. You have two potent methods towards this purpose that I have advocated many times and in many ways with urgent emphasis. That are, discern that which is false and break ties with it, and discern that which is true and gain intimacy with it. This will take time and effort, for so much of the work is going to entail mastering clarity and unraveling a web of conditioning that is aimed at keeping your mind enslaved. But with continual effort put forth, one will eventually be able to break the binds of the delusion. And one of the greatest obstacles in this, as the implications of methodological solipsism suggest, is the thinking mind. The thinking function is not the proper fundamental axiom. Rene Descartes had it wrong. It's not that you think and therefore are, but rather there is awareness. Therefore there is an I that ams, an amming that produces all experiential phenomena, such as feelings and thoughts.